Okay, this is just a general overview of the BlueRobotics Thruster System and controller components, and now the new BlueRobotics Thruster Commander, which is inside this box. I'm going to open that up in a minute. We'll look at it. This over here is basically one of the two thruster assemblies that sit outrigger style behind my seat on my kayak. And these things fold open, or I can lower or raise them. There's a pneumatic closure right here that's rated at greater than the thrust of the motor, and it works quite well. And I've had this design around for many months now, and use other kinds of controller boxes, not the Thruster Commander, but basically using some of the motor controllers from Polulo, and it works real well. They work fine, except they're pretty manual. So I'll have two potentiometers, one for the right, one for the left, forward and reverse direction. The new Thruster Commander actually has all of that integrated into it, so both thrusters are working together in concert. But before we go there, what is inside this Pelican box has been around for a while. It's pretty simple. I built this last year, and this all operates off of standard RC control signals. Each one of the thrusters is a brushless motor, and there's a electronic speed control, one for each one of the thrusters, standard RC inputs to those. This area right in here is a bunch of current measuring stuff that is for diagnostics. It's not a real necessary part of the design. And down inside the box is a 12 volt, 25 amp hour LiPo battery. It's they're not cheap, but boy, they're small and they're lightweight. I really like them. I've also got down here a main kill switch that I operate from a remote hand controller, and this all gets sealed up. But before I go there, you'll notice this RJ45 cable right here, and it comes out here on this side of the box, which you can't see. It's all watertight, and then comes into the, I call it a handheld controller, but it really sits on a shelf beside my seat in my kayak. So anyway, this all gets sealed up, and my thrusters connect here. One thruster here, one thruster there. My other kill switch, which is part of the original design, goes here. I still keep that. And then this connector here is just to power my fish finder. So it's pretty straightforward. The controller box, I'm going to open this up, as I said, in just a few minutes, but it's basically made from all BlueRobotics components. This is basically a pilot light. It tells me when I've got power to this box. This is their dead man switch, and I can basically turn off the thrusters with this switch if I need to. And there's two things going on here. The main power kill switch for the box and this one here actually operate a little bit differently. But I'll explain that in a little while. These two controllers here are my speed and direction. And how they work, I'm actually using the same physical apparatus that works the switch. I'm using the same thing basically for my pots. Well, what I did is I switched. Blue Robotics makes a couple of things that are well, all our penetrators are kind of basically the same. This one here is a little bit different than these in that this is meant to activate a switch. These are actually meant to just act as a vent. And so what they look like, let's see if I've got one here. They sort of look like this. And what I've done is I've modified these. So I had to drill out this hole here. I've got a 1/4 inch piece of brass that's been drilled and tapped that matches the thread on this piece. This one's from the switch side, that's why it's black. And I cut it off when I was doing some initial experimenting. And this one here is actually the vent connection. And they won't come off because I've Loctited them in place. So there's a couple of O-rings, there's a little silicone grease in there, and this goes in like that. And you can turn this, and it works quite well. The potentiometers that, and I'll show you in a minute, where this shaft connects to, those potentiometers are center detent potentiometers, and you can feel the center detent when you turn these. And center detent on these pots for the Thruster Commander basically equates to neutral or null or stop. No thrusters are turning at that point. So as I increase my speed, if I use the speed control, both thrusters will work together. That is, as I go forward, each one will turn in the same direction, pushing the boat forward. And if I go in reverse, the opposite happens. When I steer, and this is the interesting part, when you steer this, let's say I'm going at some, you know, I've got my head on backwards. This is my speed. This is my steering. Doesn't matter. You can switch them around any way you want. But if I'm going at some particular speed and then I start to use the steering to steer right or left, the thrusters will start to behave in such a way that more thrust is given to one and the other will slow down. I think eventually it'll actually reverse. So and you can do that in both directions. The really cool thing that really demonstrates how this works is if you put the speed to 0 and just use your steering knob, then both thrusters will run, but in opposite directions. And this allows you to basically what I call turn in place, skid steer. It's kind of like a bobcat tractor or a tank. And I did some tests yesterday that were quite remarkable. It's probably the only thing you can see in my videos that are meaningful. This setup yesterday, the two thrusters on a very calm lake over here in Salem, Oregon, I got up to about 3.2 miles an hour, which is way faster than I typically go. I usually troll at 1 to 1.2 miles an hour. So anyway, I'm real happy with that. I'm going to take this apart and we'll look inside. So I've taken the 4 screws out that hold the lid to the chassis. This chassis is a Bud chassis and is rated to IP68. So that basically means I can stick it under a meter of water for 30 minutes or something and it shouldn't leak, as just the box itself. And you'll notice here that I'm still connected to the rest of the electronics on the lid, and it's just an RJ45. And I can remove that. This cable currently slips because I've loosened this connection here. But here's each one of my pieces from the top. Turn it over. So we basically have 2 potentiometers. There is the Thruster Commander, very tiny. quite elegant. This is a line driver I use to get from this board here into my main controller box. This is my dead man switch here. No modifications there. This is the pilot light, no modifications. And these here are the modified BlueRobotics vents that I couple to my 10K center detent pots via a Servo City clamp. Works really well. And when I tested these under about 10 inches of water for 30 minutes, nothing leaked. And again, what's inside here is basically this. You can see that. So just, again, a couple of O-rings, some silicone grease. That fits in there. Turns nicely. And I'm good to go. So I really appreciate BlueRobotics, well, for making this Thruster Commander and also having these penetrators. So that's it. I put for a couple of reasons. You'll notice that there's an 1/8 inch aluminum plate that is sandwiched between these connectors and the cover. And I did that because I needed to basically a washer in here because the threads stopped short. And that worked out really well because then I could mount the other components, the standoffs, onto that plate and ended up not having to penetrate the cover. So I was happy with that. It worked out really well. And now we'll just, I'm not sure what's next, but thanks BlueRobotics. Great job on the Thruster Commander and all your other stuff. These are basically some views of the original Thruster setup. Oh gosh, it's done several months ago, but basically the setup that hasn't changed. Oh, this is exciting. This works. Okay, now I'm going to drop my speed down to 0 and I'm going to do a turn in place. Probably should back myself up a little bit here. Okay, now I'm going to turn in place. I need a float or something that I could show that I'm really not moving anywhere other than just in a tight circle. But this does work perfectly. And this, the Thruster Commander is far superior to using 2 pots. Even my joystick configuration wasn't too exciting. But this works really well. I'm trying to pick myself a point on the beach, on the shore, to see how much, if anything, I'm drifting. And I'm not drifting at all. So I'll turn the other way. So this is very cool. Yeah, BlueRobotics did a good job on this. And again, I'm not drifting. My reference point on the shore hasn't moved. I moved a little bit, but I'll go back the other way. My potentiometers are working great. And using the BlueRobotics components, just perfect. Now I'm going to head out. Now I'm going forward and use a little bit of steering. Get myself lined up maybe. But again, it's hands-free, it works.